Back in 2018, I was living with my mother. I've been living with her for about 3 years at this point. I had just got out of a bad marriage and divorced prior, so she was my safe haven. Eventually, I was at the point where I wanted my own space, so I'd been applying for a few apartments. Months later, I got a call about a one-bedroom available, so I jumped on it. I was a bit hesitant initially because it had been so long since I'd lived on my own, and plus I had a fear of the dark. But I still moved and was excited about starting over in my own place. My first night, I pretty much spent hanging up my curtains and arranging my furniture and so forth. It was about 11 pm and I was tired and had to be to work early the next morning, so I got a shower and hopped in bed. I generally sleep with my TV on because it's hard for me to sleep in total silence. I don't know why. Anyways, it would be at least 3 more days until my internet would be hooked up and I could see my Fire Stick. So I just cut the TV on for light and dozed off. As I was asleep, I remember hearing something in my room closet slide across and fall. I literally heard it in my sleep and it startled me so bad, I was afraid to even get up and move. So I laid there, kind of just praying in my head like, oh God, please don't let me see anything I shouldn't see. Please protect me. So I ended up getting maybe 4 hours later for work. And I remembered what happened, so I went into my closet to check it out. It was just my curtain that had fallen. Thank God for that. But then I thought about it. How could it move from one side of the closet to the other without anyone moving it? I tried to write it off and eventually did. So fast forward 3 months later, I met a handsome gentleman who's my current husband. We had just started dating. He used to always come over every single weekend and would stay with me, or sometimes a couple days a week. By that time, I had already kind of got used to living by myself, but it was also nice to have his company. One day, I had to go to work, so he was at my house by himself. When I got home, he was like, yeah, so there was a huge spider in your house and I had to kill it. I don't know where it came from, but it was huge. I was honestly shocked, because my apartment had no bugs, no rodents, no nothing. I didn't have a lot of stuff in my place at the time, so I don't have a hiding space at all for any of those things. Plus my rent office got all their tenants' apartments sprayed every 3 months. Here I was again. I wrote that off. One night, when I was on the phone with my husband, who was my then boyfriend, we were talking about our weekend plans since he's coming down the day after. All of a sudden, I heard water come on in my bathroom. The bathroom was across the hall from my room. So I got really quiet and my husband asked me if I was okay. I said yeah, but my shower just came on by itself. He started laughing like a girl stopped playing. I said no, I'm being serious. So I went into the bathroom to look and indeed it was on. He was like, maybe it's just some water pressure, and again I wrote it off. But by this time, I really started to think something was wrong in my house. I'm a seer. I've always been that way since I was a kid. I could look in a person's eyes and see everything about their life. I could also see all the spirits that were not so friendly. 6 months had passed, and my husband had just moved in with me. I swear that night when we went to sleep, I opened my eyes and I saw a little black girl standing in my doorway. Her attire looked like she was from the 50s. She had 3 braids in her head and had on a little yellow dress. When I blinked my eyes, she was gone. I didn't tell my husband at first because I didn't want to freak him out. Over time, different things continued to transpire. In my bathroom at night, I swear you could hear a woman humming, but it was coming from my air vents. I told my husband that and he didn't hear anything. I'd be in the living room looking at the TV, and out of the corner of my eye I'd see something too, and very black, standing in my kitchen doorway staring at me. By this time, I'd gotten used to things happening. I wasn't fazed in the least. A year later, things really began to pick up in activity. I'd hear knocking and things would go missing. My husband thought it was my imagination and that I was just being overly sensitive at the time, particularly due to me being pregnant with my first child. Well, his opinion changed quickly as we were in the bed, and we both heard knocking on the wall in our bedroom while we were wide awake. From that point on, my husband believed me and he started seeing things as well. He got where he'd sleep with the big ceiling light on and I'd ask him why. He came out and told me he's been seeing what he refers to as an imp in the house, that he saw it standing at the end of our bed, and then it would rub on him and so forth. I believed my husband because I knew things were happening. He hates my mirror I had in the hallway. I had a swivel mirror, the kind that rotates. He said it made him feel uneasy. My mum bought it for me as a housewarming gift in my new apartment, so he'd eventually cover my mirror up because he was so afraid. Fast forward 2 years later, I had my first son and was now pregnant with my second child. I started seeing things more at that point. My husband was working a shift where he had to be at work at 3 a.m. So every time he left for work, I took all I needed for me and the kids, put it in the bedroom and would lock the door until it got light outside. One of those times I was in the room and I went into a dream-like vision, where I saw feet moving under the door as if someone was in my house. And something came into the room and held me down and walked towards my son's bed and he started screaming. At that point, I came out of it and grabbed my son. And when I looked at my wall, I saw the silhouette of a goat's head and damn near passed out. I called my husband and told him I couldn't do it anymore and I packed up my kids' stuff. I went to my mom's where I literally stayed on and off for 6 months. During this time period, I had a lot of bad luck. We kept trying to move and every time we found something, it wouldn't fall through. We began to lose a lot of things. My husband's begun to change and has crazy behaviour. Mind you, he was still living in the house being attacked on a daily basis. We had a next door neighbour who would come and sit with us sometimes. She was a very young girl. She had a young son. The last time I saw her was the day before Christmas. She was over chatting. A week later, she was murdered, and her mother was murdered, and her mom died in my yard. You can still see the body imprint. After that, me and my husband finally moved. I sometimes ride past that old place and can still feel the evilness in there watching and waiting for its next victim. The place is occupied by another tenant. I pray they'd never experienced what I've. My name is Tamara. My whole life, I've always experienced things in the paranormal realm. When I was a child, I often saw things no one could see, as well as I could hear things no one could hear. One of the many things I saw as a child would be goblet-like creatures, or just creatures that truly were not of this world. They used to scare me so bad, and no one actually believed what I saw. I mean, hey, I probably wouldn't either if someone told me they saw something like that in real life that looks like it came straight out of a movie with heavy special effects. It's taken me 16 years to talk about this simply because what took place 16 years ago almost drove me insane. It was 2006. I was 16 years old and I was a sophomore in high school. I was your pretty much average teenage girl. I was at that stage of my teens where I started feeling myself, as the older folks would call it. I enjoyed hanging out a lot, especially during the weekends. I like to get cute, get in the streets and enjoy myself. I guess you can say I enjoyed myself a little bit too much, because I ended up dropping out of school in the 10th grade so I could play in the streets, as I called it. I'd often leave my house at about 4 or 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, and sometimes wouldn't return until a Sunday or Monday. As bad as I hate to admit it, I was a very disobedient, rebellious teenager. My mother would always tell me, Tamara, you better stop running on the streets and going out and coming home so late at night. It ain't nothing but the devil out that time of hour. I'd simply say, alright Ma, you act like I don't know what's going on in the world. She just looked at me and shook her head. Tamara, you ain't gonna learn until something crazy happens to you. And you better be careful walking by the house next door. You know the house next door is haunted. I just looked at her and smacked my lips and said, Ma, I'm gone. You do too much. Honestly, I wish I would have listened to my mom, especially about the house next door. I lived in the part of town that most people would call the low-class side, or the side where rent is cheaper. It was just my older brother and sister, my sister's boyfriend during the time, my mom, my little brother and myself, as well as 2 small dogs. We lived next door to an old red wooden house that no one lived in for years. There were several empty houses and houses people didn't keep up around where I lived. It was something that was not uncommon for that particular area. Years prior, people lived there in the home. However, for some reason, my mom said she just saw them up and leave one day, and they never came back. The house always gave me eerie vibes, especially at night time. It's almost as if the house had eyes and would watch you. I hated that we had our washer and dryer outside because that meant I had to go outside to retrieve my items, but I always had my bat with me. My experience with what I saw in regards to the house happened one night in July 2006. I was out with my best friend, hanging with some older guys. I didn't want to walk home. Depending on which direction I walked, it was roughly a 15-minute walk at most. But the guy was a douche and pretty much said I had to give up something to get a ride, but there was no way that was happening. I took it upon myself to make the walk. The only thing I hated about making this walk was that a couple of the streets I had to get on had no light, or either it was one person with a porch light on and everybody else was off. So I'm roughly about 3 minutes away from my home, when this feeling of dread comes over me and the hair stands up on my arms and the back of my neck. I thought to myself, it's just the darkness outside, no one is out, and plus it's 3:30 in the morning. And obviously, the mind plays tricks on you. So I picked up the pace and started walking faster, looking all around me. Just as I got in front of the house that was abandoned, that was next door to my house, I stopped in my tracks. I heard a voice come from the house, or rather on the steps, saying, "Hiya, you shouldn't be walking by yourself at night." I looked as hard as I could, but could not for the life of me see anyone. The voice spoke again, and its voice changed to that I can only describe as darker and said, "You can't see me, dear, but I see every part of you. But I'll be paying you a visit soon." As soon as I heard that, I saw it. It was this thing. The best way to describe it was like that of a big walking owl. It smiled at me and was I froze in fear. I saw its teeth in the dark and its glowing eyes. It stood up and it had these wings that expanded. My will to live kicked in, and I've never run so fast in my life. I felt it behind me, but I managed to get in the house because my mom knew I came in late, with no key so she'd leave it unlocked. I got in the house. Our door was actually broken, so even though you lock it from the inside, it still opens. Pulled the big couch in front of the door and ran into my room, which accurately locks. I was shaken so badly because literally what I encountered is something you truly see in horror movies. Nothing in real life, right? I didn't sleep at all that night. I tucked in all the curtains on my window so that it couldn't look in or see me, or I couldn't see it. The whole rest of the night I heard sinister laughter next door. About 10 a.m. the next day, my mum asked me what time I got in last night. I told her about 2:30 or 3:30 and she was like, "Oh, okay," but had a weird look on her face. I said, "Why, Ma?" She said, "I thought you or one of your friends was outside the house last night because I kept hearing this crazy laughter and it sounded like something hit my window." I sighed. "Ma, what is it tomorrow?" She responded, "Maybe something is in the house that next door." It literally talked, had these glowing eyes and sharp teeth, and chased me to the house. She just looked at me kinda puzzled. She responded, "Now Tamara, didn't I tell you not to walk your ass up in this house in the middle of the night and be staying in the streets? You're hard-hearted and just don't listen. Ma, I'm not lying. That's why you kept hearing that crazy laughter. It was from next door." She responded, "Tamara, get up and do something productive today. Stop all that foolish talk." She then walked out of my room and shut the door. I can't expect her to believe me because no one's ever really believed me. Well, no one except my aunt that lived up the road from us. Maybe I'll pay her a visit to discuss what happened. I was in a place where in front of me there was a man, I think. He was obviously not in a good psychological state. He was nervous, acting weird, shocked and on the verge of crying. I couldn't understand why. Then I saw a woman. She was quite old with extremely long black hair. They were in a room with many objects from toys to other random things, and he was sitting on a couch or something, looking at certain objects placed in front of him. The woman was looking at him and saying something, but I don't remember what. While I was waiting in the other room, I heard my name and went inside and creeped out. The man had vanished, and now I was the one sitting on the couch and the old woman started talking to me. I remember I couldn't really trust her. She was a bit scary after all, but I decided that I didn't have any other choice but to answer her questions. From what I can remember, she was trying to figure out which of the objects was best to place in front of me. Unfortunately, I don't remember any of the objects. Maybe only the fact that they were talking. And I was surprised by that. They had personalities. I remember that the woman told me that I should only pick or get the objects that really were important to me and had an impact on my life. I was so confused, and in the end, I think she gave me the chosen ones. After the selection, me and the woman were walking down some stairs. While we were walking, she seemed compassionate towards me and was being friendlier than before. Next thing I remember, I was in my house, which was different from my actual home, and I felt so depressed, sad, and I started crying. I was crying uncontrollably. I even saw my reflection in my face so clearly, with tears on my face. I don't think I've ever seen my real face in the mirror before in a dream. I usually know I'm me, but never seen myself like me seeing my face. Then, many thoughts gathered in my head, and I thought about everyone I left behind. I thought of my boyfriend at first, then he wouldn't know where I was, and that he'd be depressed and anxious about where I've been. I thought about my parents, them being devastated and my mom crying. I thought about my best friend, how she'd feel that now that I'm nowhere to be found and that we wouldn't laugh together like we used to. I thought about my sweet dog. She'd be confused about where I'd be and trying to find me around our house. All of these thoughts made me cry so much. I've never cried like this before. It's the worst pain I've ever felt. I went into the living room and I saw my parents. I think it must have been days since I left. She was hopeless, dark circles around her eyes. She seemed empty inside. My dad was next to her, comforting her and trying not to cry. I wanted to show them I could see them and I was close to them, but I couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't see me. I felt alone, but at that moment I saw my lovely dog. Her ears were up like a surprised puppy, and she started wiggling her tail, looking in a specific direction. That was actually where I was. She could see me, and I felt warm inside. I wasn't forgotten after all. She came close to me, and I immediately petted her and tried to hug her and play with her. She could see me, although she may not have felt that I was touching her. But she still was acting the same when we were playing around our home. Then, my mum got up and saw our dog acting like someone's there, but she couldn't see me. But I think she knew and she started smiling and crying. The whole situation was extremely nerve-wracking and sad. I mean, everything was depressing. At least I could see them, but it broke my heart that they couldn't see me. I was a ghost, a sad one, the one who never stopped crying. I don't remember how I died. I don't remember much else. I tried writing every detail I can remember from my dream, but that's all I got. I'm just feeling weird, and it's surprising that I could actually see my face in a dream. Everything felt so real, and believe me, it was so intense. What could this woman be? What were the objects, and why were they talking? It feels so weird to me. Is it a bad sign seeing I'm dead? I went there one Sunday with my boyfriend. It was a scorching hot summer's day, and the place was already packed by the time we arrived. We soon regretted choosing such a popular day to visit, but had already paid our entrance fee, so decided to see as much of the place as we could before the crowds got too much. We queued for over half an hour to go inside the White Tower, and then filed painfully slowly up the old spiral staircase, as the people who had already been to the top squeezed past us to file slowly back down. Every few minutes, the line going up the stairs would stop for a while to allow the people who had reached the top time to look about. And before we were even halfway up, I was seriously wishing that we hadn't bothered joining the queue because, despite the thick stone walls, it was becoming uncomfortably hot and airless in the stairwell, and I was beginning to feel very faint and lightheaded. And to make matters worse, somewhere just up ahead of us, a young baby had started to cry. This was in the days before I had children of my own, so I wasn't very sympathetic. And as the cries turned to high-pitched screaming, I looked about at the people closest to me on the stairs and rolled my eyes. But they were pretending not to hear it, and so I grimaced and whispered to my boyfriend that I wished they'd shut it up. My boyfriend gave me an odd and I suspected condemning look, but didn't say anything, and we slowly continued to file up the stairs. As we did, the screaming got so loud that I seriously considered pushing into the line of people, going back down the stairs and just leaving the tower. But we'd spent such a long time queuing and then slowly filing up the stairs that I told myself we must be nearly at the top, and hopefully the baby would either soon be brought down or at least run out of steam. At each turn in the staircase, I expected to see a hot and harassed mother suddenly appear, carrying her screaming baby back down the stairs. But though the screaming continued, no mother or baby passed by. After what seemed like an eternity in that heat and noise, we finally made it to the room at the top, but I then realised that the crying was now coming from behind us. I said something to my boyfriend about how I'd thought that baby had been up ahead of us, but he just shrugged and quickly looked about the room. Basically a fireplace and a window, before the guard ushered us back out to allow the next group in. As we climbed back down the staircase, I made encouraging comments to those slowly filing up. They didn't have much further to go, etc. And also debated with myself whether I should say something to the mum with the screaming baby, about maybe feeding it sometime, but as you've probably guessed, there was no baby. The crying continued down the stone staircase all the way to the bottom, but then faded away as we went out through the tower door. As we went down the wooden ramp outside, I looked about for a baby but couldn't see one, and so turned to my boyfriend and asked him where that bloody baby had gone. The baby which had spent the best part of 40 minutes screaming its lungs out on the staircase and giving me a splitting headache. But he looked confused and asked me what baby. Turned out that he had never heard any baby crying as we'd slowly climbed the staircase, which is why he'd given me a weird look when I whispered to him about hoping they'd shut it up, nor when we climbed back down the stairs. Be interested to know if anyone else visiting that tower has ever heard a phantom baby screaming. I read up on the history of the White Tower afterwards, but couldn't find any reference to an infant, and the screams were definitely that of a very young or newborn child. When I was a kid, I spent 9 years in a house with major poltergeist activity, for which I got the blame. Cheers, Mum and Dad. And living with presences which utterly terrified me. But I do have one nice ghost story from the house, which I thought I'd share, as I think comforting ones are often the best. One of my uncles, my dad's youngest stepbrother, was supposed to be babysitting me and my older sister one night, when he suddenly collapsed and died in our hallway while my parents and my nan were getting ready to leave. He'd developed leukemia about 6 months previously, but was only 19, and apparently been responding well to therapy, and so it came as quite a shock. A year later, on the eve of the anniversary of his death, my mum decided to buy a bright red pot plant and put it in the lounge as a tribute. However, the next morning, she found that all the petals had changed colours to yellow. She was really angry and had specifically chosen a red plant as she'd remembered my nan commenting on an arrangement at his funeral about how he'd always loved the colour red. So took it back up to the greengrocer's to complain. But when she got there, the guy told her that there was no way that particular plant could change colour, and he had no idea how it had. He offered to swap it for a different plant, but didn't have any red plants left, and so my mum, now feeling a bit stupid, ended up bringing the first plant home again. But when she rang my nan later that day and explained about the plant, and how sorry she was it had changed colour overnight when she knew that Michael's favourite colour had been red, my nan told her that no, although he had liked the colour red, his favourite colour, since he was a little boy, had always been bright yellow. I grew up in a highly paranormally active, but disturbingly so house. But happily, our current home of 19 years, though active on a paranormal level, is not all frightening. Knocking on walls, footsteps upstairs when no one is up there, heavy breathing in one of the upstairs rooms, Shadowy figures passing down the halls, seen out the corner of your eye. Guitars being strummed by invisible hands. Lights being turned on and curtains pulled open and shut. The sudden and unexplained smell of smoke or violets in the dining room. And both myself and my partner having felt a hand on our back, etc. The house is mildly active all year round, but October and November always sees things heat up quite a bit. Though not sure whether this is due to the history of the house or the fact that these are usually the wettest months. Anyhow, all the activity here is very non-threatening, and in fact, living in a reasonably isolated farmhouse and with my partner working away, I actually find it quite comforting knowing that I'm not alone with the kids. Anyhow, last week my partner was home for a few days, and on Thursday morning, as I was walking back from the kitchen to our bedroom, I found a large oblong shape of what looked like white smoke hovering and curling in front of me at head height, which is something I've never seen before. I watched it for a few seconds and then just thought, okay then, and walked through it and went into our bedroom. I told my partner I'd just seen something in the hall, but before I had a chance to describe it, he described it for me, apparently having seen exactly the same thing the day before. He usually just dismisses all the activity he doesn't witness firsthand, so I'm happy he also saw this one. Be interested to know if anyone else has seen something like this, as it's the first time I have. No odour, change of temperature as I walked through it, etc. Just literally an oblong box of what appeared to be white smoke, curling and shifting in front of me at head height. So to preface, the Reno was just a bathroom repair. We had to rely on the dry wall of the shower because of water damage. So nothing substantial to the point of a whole scene from the movie Poltergeist and finding bones in the yard. But still, stuff has picked up since then. I had experienced a few things since we first moved here about 3 or 4 years ago, including hearing myself and my family members, seeing people who aren't there, watching stuff move or break on their own, and, although not the worst, but the creepiest, I saw myself walk from my room to the back door. The man I saw had much shorter hair than I did at the time and didn't notice me. We've got a couple regular specials, guests. One thing is in my parents' closet, and it's gotten much meaner since the Reno. Another is a tall blonde man that my sister and I coined the name the Swede. He's more of a protecting thing than others, and usually comforts us when something lashes out. And the last one was a more tricky thing, stomping up and down the hallway and running into my face, knocking on my door and waking me up mid-sleep. And this was all before we had the bathroom repaired. As the repairs were going on, I heard 2 of my sisters calling for me from different sides of the house when I'm home alone, and one of them's even moved out. And I've recently had a nightmare about Joseph, an entity that had harassed me in a past house. This entity is his whole own thing and had left physical handprints on my body. And he was standing over my bed and telling me that he was back. I said that I won't let him hurt me or others, and he laughed as he told me that he wasn't after me this time. I was having an argument with my father yesterday, and I turned because I heard my mother talking in the kitchen, and both my father and I watched as some items that were on top of the microwave suddenly shot into her face as she was walking past. Some papers and plastic containers. It also broke some glass bowls that my grandmother had gifted us. This morning, I woke up and had to go, as you do. But I noticed my father's in the bathroom, so I decided to wait in my bedroom to avoid another possible argument. Some minutes later, I hear the door open and he starts petting one of the cats, ringing her collar's bell before walking into and shutting his room's door. He drags his feet, so I know it was him I heard. But I opened the door and nope, he was still there. He had actually started a shower as I was watching the space trying to figure out what was happening, so it in no way could have been him. My sisters and I are a little more than nervous, because activity has definitely picked up with Dad yelling at us a lot more than usual lately. My mum is trying to ignore that anything is going on, because if they were bad, they would have shown me and my dad, so is against the idea of ghosts that he goes on full tangents about how stupid an idea it is for them to exist, despite watching line of marks, like a scratch from an animal, appear on my side once while watching TV with him. I had screamed out from the pain and he asked me what made me yell. I lifted my shirt side a little and I could see I was already bleeding from the gashes. My family moved into this house 2 years ago, and we've always had an issue with the garage door opening, shutting, slamming, locking, and seeing each other walk into the garage. Creepy enough, considering the family member we see isn't even home. But it was only ever the 2 rooms closest to the garage. Recently, I've been seeing someone walk from my bedroom to the bathroom, across a small hallway. My sister also has a room in the hallway, but hers is right next to the bathroom, so she can't see into there that much. Within the past 2 weeks, I've seen what looks like my youngest older sister, and the youngest of us 4 girls, walking from our 4 room to the bathroom. I hear her stepping and swinging the door shut, locking it and flipping the light on. I thought this was weird, because on my phone call with Mom just a few minutes prior, she said that sister wasn't even home. I dismissively say, "Oh, I didn't know I was home." I'll call her A, second oldest B, and my oldest sister C. Dad, B, and I were all on the couch laying down, and I only saw the top of the head. Dad and B look at me like I'm crazy. "A isn't even home," B says to me, as Dad says, "What?" I went to check the bathroom, and sure enough, all of the locking and shutting the door did happen. This happened 3 more times up to yesterday after work, where even my sister B said to have seen someone walking from my room to the bathroom while she was alone in the house. This happened a few years ago, but it lasted so long and it was so scary that I could never forget it. Mom says that her and my sister Jay are sensitive to and able to communicate with spirits. I was never sure if I could. I was always told I couldn't, but now I'm not so sure. My sister Jay bought a glow-in-the-dark Ouija board from Toys R Us, of all places, and put it in her and my sister A's room, which they shared while I shared my room with my other sister C. My mother's mother died about 2 months beforehand, and it really messed us up. Everything was fine for about 3 weeks until I had a nightmare. In the nightmare, I was sitting on my bed with my legs hanging down, and I was facing my sister's room. It didn't seem weird to me that I was going through the wall, and I sat and watched as a man adjusted his suit tie from where my sister's closet was. He had slicked back hair and stubble all over his chin. He looked like a very classy man, except for how bad you felt just by looking at him. He told me, "Once I'm free, I'm going to kill your mother." I can't recall if I said anything to him, but when I woke up, I felt like I was still there, sitting on the edge of my bed and staring at him. I could feel him staring at me. I told my mother that Joseph wants to get out of the board, and he was planning on hurting her. She didn't believe me and said that me naming what I saw made them stronger. A week later, my mother approached me and asked me how I knew what was going to happen, and I told her. It was horrible being in that house. The house was my home, and whatever he did ruined it for me. I couldn't even sit in the living room one day because I'd keep feeling electricity and keep getting electrocuted because of him. And I told Mom that I think Joseph had a cause as to why I kept feeling it so badly while just sitting on the couch. A week later, she tells me that the homeowner just told them that a guy burned to death in 75. Since then, I could always feel him staring at me. He was always in the closet of my sister's room, like he was stuck there, and there was a strange dark feeling around him that lashed out like tentacles in every direction. I could always see him in my mind. I was looking into the house from an aerial view somehow, and I would feel him with ears that weren't my own. I could hear him mocking me, telling me that once he was free, he would eviscerate my mother and the sisters who helped her let him get closer. He would always yell about wanting to kill my mother. Sometimes I'd wake up from a nightmare because his tormenting and teasing woke me up. Doors would slam, we'd hear footsteps down the hall when everyone was in bed, and we'd see people walking through the house, and we'd walk to where they went and see no one there. Once, I was putting a giant container of Mom's stuffed peppers into our crappy backup fridge in the garage, because the fridge in the kitchen had no room, and as I got down to the bottom of the steps, I turned back because I forgot to grab the mashed potatoes too. And I see the door slam shut by itself so hard that the door on the fridge behind me opens. One of the reasons it was down there is because we usually slam the front door shut. Even when we moved, I was still connected to him by that weird aerial view. We moved a good 3 miles away. Not that far in the long run, but I hoped it was far enough away from him. I was so wrong. He was so pissed off that we left, that I left, that his weird black energy I mentioned before had engulfed the whole house and he was screaming at me to come back, that I had to come back and that I belonged to him. I would constantly wake up with bruises on me from where he would grab me in my dreams. I was trying to ignore his existence, trying to force myself to believe that this was all imaginary. But the bruises kept coming and coinciding with where he would hit me in my dreams. And when I looked back to the house in my mind with that aerial view version of me, he would somehow grab that too. While I was awake, he once grabbed the arm of me when I was looking at him with the aerial view and dragged me down to look at him and demanded I return. I quickly left whatever version of me that even is and went to school. My friends in my second period English class all asked me what happened, and when I was confused, they showed me the large and dark hand-shaped bruise on my left arm. I made up a story about me starting to sleepwalk and how I must have grabbed my own arm really hard. Somehow they bought it, and it went away in 2 weeks. About 2 weeks after that, I was sitting on our couch in the living room of the new house and was watching TV with Dad, who refuses to believe in ghosts, and I don't blame him. And I could feel Joseph suddenly lash out again, and suddenly the left side of my lower back is burning in strips. I cry as a throb of pain suddenly hits from the burning, and my dad looks at my side where I told him the pain was. Dad gets pissed off and yells at me for messing with the cats, and I say I didn't, and ask what it looks like. He takes me to the bathroom and takes me to the mirror and shows me the 4 bloody strips on my hip and says, "Not messing with the cats, bullshit. Maybe next time leave the animals alone." I told Mom, and she brought over a friend who said they have some ability to stop it. Now at this point, I'm half believing them. I convinced myself pretty well that what happened in the last house was all made up by me. I can't remember when I stopped seeing him after that, but when I look back nowadays, I don't see him in that house. All I feel is a faint shadow of what used to be Joseph. It isn't even him anymore, just what's left. An imprint. This is the only thing that's ever hurt me. I'm relieved he's gone, but it was horrible. He had tormented me over a span of 4 years. The year was 2012 and I was pregnant with my firstborn. I had just recently lost my father to depression and was at a low point in my life. My best friend had just moved back into a childhood home after living in Alaska for a few years, so we decided to catch up and watch some movies. I arrived at my friend's house at 5 p.m. We laughed the whole time, and before I knew it, the sun had gone down. At around 10 p.m, her mother came in and told us to go to sleep. I hadn't planned on staying the night. I was originally going to leave around sundown as there were no streetlights in the area, and I was too scared to drive back in the dark. I wasn't tired, but we turned everything off in her bedroom. She couldn't sleep with any lights on in her room. However, I'm a huge scaredy cat and usually leave the TV on. So at this point, the only light in the room came from her digital alarm clock. I told her to talk to me in the dark so I could relax and fall asleep. After a few minutes, our eyes adjusted to the darkness and we noticed movement at the foot of her bed. Something had crawled into her bed and was underneath the covers. At first it was small and was circular in shape, like a ball. It rolled slowly in between us underneath the queen blanket we both shared. There was no pressure on the bed. I should mention the bed was a queen bed, and there was not a lot of space in between us, but it never grazed our legs. The farther it climbed up, the larger it got. It turned from a roll to a crawl, as a circular object turned to a head, and you could make out the outline of the shoulders. It was small, but got larger and larger the closer it got to us. It started to form a humanoid shape, the outline of a small child. At this point, we aren't scared, just confused. As it reaches the end of the blanket near our heads, we look down towards the middle of the bed and see her chihuahua, who's also confused. He didn't react. Suddenly, as it reached the end of the blanket, a blue orb came out of the covers and we just stared at it. It was blinking different shades of blue and white and hung above the bed between our heads. I could see the reflection of it in the dog's eyes. Then just as quickly as it appeared, it flew further up and flew full speed at the wall and disappeared. At this point, the fear creeps in and I'm confused and angry. I'll tell my best friend if she saw that too. She does and starts to describe the same thing I saw. I sit up in bed and that's when I get the overwhelming feeling that someone is watching us. I look around the dark room trying to adjust my eyes when I notice at the foot of the bed directly in front of me, there's a little girl. About 10 to 13, curly shoulder-length brown hair, thin, and she's wearing a nightgown. We made eye contact and I couldn't look away. I could hear my friend in the background saying something but couldn't make out the words. Once again, I felt no fear. I was just stunned and couldn't look away until my friend's voice got louder. I turned to look at her and snap. I tell her to shut up angrily. Then I look back and the girl is gone. I freak out and apologise to her. I have no idea why I suddenly got so angry, and I had no idea that she was saying. She then tells me just at that moment, she started praying loudly. She's a Catholic. The weird thing is that even though I couldn't see her anymore, I could feel her. I knew she was in the room but hiding in the closet. The closet had no doors. I was too scared to go home as I didn't want her to show up in my back seat. So I told my friend that we should lay down with our heads facing the foot of the bed, and I slept facing the closet in case she got out. Let me mention I had no interest in interacting with her. I just knew that if she came back out and tried to attack me, I'd be ready for it. The dog didn't make a sound the whole time. He was in a trance-like state, but he's usually a grumpy and mean dog, quick to bite and bark, but quiet that night. First of all, let me tell you that this happened almost 15 years ago. I live in Monterrey, Mexico. If you don't know, it's one of the 3 biggest cities north of Mexico. Something similar to Austin or San Antonio. In 2005, I used to live with 5 other friends in a country house outside of the city when I was in college. One of my best friends lived there because of the divorce of his parents and didn't want to live alone, so he invited us. You could imagine all the stupid and immature stuff we did back then. We used to have very stupid rules, such as have dinner in the roof every night. We put a table, chairs and a couch just to be on the roof having fun. One night, I believe it was a Monday, while we're having dinner, just after a game of paintball, all of a sudden, I heard a very loud noise above us and used the paintball gun to see what that was. Turns out it was an owl. I was about to take a shot when one of my friends took the gun out of my hands and started to scream. "What are you doing, man? That's a witch!" And then started screaming something like, "Go away, you fucking witch! We don't want you here, you cunt!" I was shocked and asked him what the fuck was that. And he said that in Mexico, there's the belief that witches can turn into owls to fly or something like that. We laughed, and that was it. That night, one of our friends who lived there and worked in a bar, so his hours were very different from us, who were university students, he was watching TV in the living room when suddenly he came into our room. We all slept in the same room to save money on air conditioning and started yelling that he heard someone had jumped the fence and gotten into the house. We all went out with golf clubs, baseball bats, and brooms, anything we could use as a weapon to defend ourselves. We searched everywhere and found no one. 2 days later, on Wednesday, a friend was talking on MSN Messenger with a girl. They were chatting on webcam, and when he asked her to take off some of her clothes, she told him no, because he was with his friends. He told her that we were already asleep, which was true, and she told him that it wasn't true, that she had just seen someone pass behind him and go down the stairs. Immediately, he entered the room screaming and woke us all up, saying that now someone had managed to get into the house. We all went back out to look for who had gotten in, and nothing. There was no one. 2 days later on Friday, it happened to me. While I was on the computer doing homework at night, and while everyone else was asleep, I started to hear voices coming from the garage floor below. At first it was far away, like a whisper, but you couldn't understand anything they said. Then the noise got louder, closer and closer. I was very scared and went into my friend's room and woke them up, saying that I heard voices downstairs, that now someone had gotten into the house. As you can imagine, no one was there. That Sunday, all of us went back to our houses to be with our parents. The only one there was the owner. That day, his mom and brothers went to see him and eat. When his sister went to the bathroom, she said that she heard a person laugh in the walk-in closet. When she went to check, she said that she saw a girl dressed all in white, with 2 ponytails on each side of her face, got scared and mad, and went to tell her mom. Immediately, his mother got angry, thinking that he had a woman hiding in the house. She yelled something at him like, "Why do you have a whore hiding in the house?" He told her there was no one else in the house, that we had all gone with our parents, and there were no women hiding. When they went to check again, they saw that no one was there. His mother immediately got scared. She's very religious and thought it was a ghost. The next day they took a father, pastor or shaman or something like that, to bless the house, and he told them that he felt some presence in the house, that of a girl and that of an adult. He also said that the girl told him that she was afraid of the other presence, and that she liked being where we were. There, she felt safe. Sometime later, I went to a very popular blog at that time about paranormal things in Latin America. It was a page from Argentina called The Paranormal, where I told what was happening to us and asked what we could do. One of the things that they answered me was to ask someone who had lived in the area for a long time before if they knew anything. The next day, I asked the lady who helped us with the cleaning if she knew anything about what the place was before. She told me that she had lived a long time ago, very close to there. That even where the house was now, before, it was a very large ranch, whose barn burned down, killing 2 people, an old man and his granddaughter. I also asked her if she had seen anything strange in the house, to which she replied immediately, "You saw the shadow?" and then said that she couldn't clean the 2nd floor alone for fear of the shadow. Over time, we learned to live with the presences. Even joking, we called her the girl every time something strange happened with the lights, or some strange noise. We said it was the girl who was there. All of us who lived there or friends who visited said in one way or another they heard, felt or saw something, but there was never any evidence. Until one day, we were all having a barbecue with our girlfriends when we took a picture. The girl on the edge of the photo, on the left, is my wife. Behind her is part of her face in a small ponytail, just like my friend's sister had seen. This photo is from 2008, several years after the events I told you about. However, we didn't realise it until a few years ago, when Facebook showed me the memory of this photograph, and we began to see that we were all with our girlfriends, but there was someone else that was not at that dinner, and we realised that it was the girl that we were finally able to photograph. I'm usually quite skeptical about ghosts, and I wouldn't inherently call this one a ghost, but I think it's interesting, and I'd like to get some other people's opinions on it. During the second lockdown in the UK, me and my girlfriend were going out for walks in a nearby forested area. We sat down in this area just for a rest to talk. During a pause in thought, I looked off into the trees. It's a fairly new part of the forest, so they're all quite skinny and spaced out. And I see what looks like a tall, pitch black figure stood next to a tree, which was quite strange. So I just kind of stared at it for a while. My girlfriend noticed me staring at something and asked what I was looking at, and I said something like, "There's something that looks like a man standing over there," and I pointed at it. She agreed that it looked like that, and I said that it was strange and that whatever was making it look like a figure was so dark since it was quite a bright day out. She seemed confused because she saw this figure as a bright white silhouette. We both described the shape to each other and it seemed to be the same, but I was still assuming we were just looking at different things. So I suggested we stand up and walk towards it and see what was causing it. However, when we stood up, we couldn't see it anymore. So we both sat back down to see if it was just the change of perspective, but it was totally gone. I'm still not fully sure what it was. Maybe we just didn't sit down exactly where we were sitting before, but we hadn't even moved. But I think it's fun to think of it as a ghost. I'm interested to see what you guys think of this, or what explanations you can come up with. I moved out of my parents' house for the first time and rented a house about 10 minutes away with my friend and his sister. This started out normal enough, going to school, going to work, college parties, etc. The first experience we had involved random banging noises coming from the basement. It came up in conversation between us, but we didn't think too much of it. Thus began escalating after a few months of living there, however. One day, I returned home from work and sat down in the living room. I began hearing voices from my roommate's bedroom and thought my friend's sister must be home. I walked over to say hello, and the voices stopped. No one was home. I thought that was weird, but went back to the living room to sit down. The voices started up again and lasted for about 5 minutes. I could only make out a word here or there, so I can't speak to any specifics. I heard we and them, and that's about it. My male roommate had a cat and it would sleep in his room every night. My roommate told me that he awoke to something grabbing and touching his feet in the middle of the night. He thought it was his cat's tail or something, but when he sat up, the cat was asleep on the floor. As a college house, we frequently had house parties with our close friends. Our friend Corey would often pass out in the recliner in the living room. One morning, after we spent the night, he told us he felt something grabbing his feet, and after a few minutes, it pulled him out of the chair by his feet onto the floor. At this point, I figured the house was haunted, but I wasn't overly worried about it. The atmosphere changed drastically, however, when I would get this strong feeling of dread and hate towards me when home alone. This feeling was very strong in the basement. Whenever leaving the house, I'd get this distinct feeling something was watching me leave. Now the cherry on top, I was asleep one night when I suddenly awoke with that feeling of dread. I looked across the room and there was a figure standing with its arm resting on top of my desk chair. I couldn't make out all of its features, but I distinctly remember its dark curly hair, its eyes, and the button-up shirt it was wearing. At first, I thought someone must have broken into our house. I stood up on my bed and confronted the figure. I asked who the fuck you are. It didn't answer me, and after getting angrier, I threatened it and took a step forward. It disappeared. I didn't tell anyone about what I saw because I couldn't be 100% sure if it was a dream, and I didn't want to freak my roommate out further. A month or so later, we were having another house party. The group of people there were all close friends. Our friend Amanda went downstairs to get a purse she'd left down there, and soon came running up the stairs hysterical. She said she saw a dude standing in the corner who she'd never seen before. We went to investigate and found nothing. I asked her to describe him, and she described the figure I saw exactly. Again, I didn't tell anyone about what I saw in my room. We moved out soon after this, and I was glad to be rid of the place. Luca was named by his creator Wayne Klesky and is part of the Catherine's Collection range of dolls. And as far as we know, he's the only one of his kind that's unique. By that I mean spirited. When or how he became like this is unknown. He first came to us in 2013. It was just after the second peak of haunting spanning 20 years and 7 houses just started again. I was looking for a Christmas present for my wife and found him advertised on a local for sale website for $70. I contacted the elderly owner, who told me that his late wife was a doll collector and she had paid $1,200 for him at an art exhibition in Melbourne, Australia in 2000, and he was a prized possession of hers. He stated that none of his adult children wanted Luca, and he just wanted him to go to a good home and even offered to give us Luca for free, but we gladly paid what he was asking. We took him home, setting him up in an old antique chair that we used for other dolls for years without incident. Within hours, I would find he wasn't as I left him. He was looking slightly to the left instead of straight ahead, but didn't think much of it at first, just passing it off as the wind or our cat had disturbed him or something, or bumped into the chair. So I carefully line his chin up with the seam that runs down the front of his chest once again, facing him looking straight ahead. This continued for weeks, but each time he would move noticeably more than the last time, including his puppets and at times his arms and legs, until it got to the point we would check on him just before we went to bed, to only find that in the morning that his head would be turned 90 degrees. Once again, I would line his chin up with the seam and make sure he was looking straight, and adjust his puppets and limbs. While this was going, the second peak of haunting was ramping up. It was the stage of we had 7 haunting occurrences a day, not counting Lucas's movements. It was a quiet day, and it was around the time Lucas started to get bolder by moving when someone was in the same room, seconds after checking on him, usually when you turn your back for a few seconds or walk past him. His head would twist 90 degrees instead of looking straight, and often there'd be a strange electrical type feeling around him while he was active. This continued on a 7 to 9 day cycle, up to the peak of haunting on the 12th of January 2016, when my wife became only what I can describe as possessed and vanished one night. After this date, Luca was still active while my wife was still missing, but less frequent. Although I've had some success with video captures of Luca lighting up EMF meters all the way, and answering directly to questions using spirit boxes, and also some really strange sound captured including a girl screaming, "Let me out," for 40 minutes straight. A tune whistled very clearly in the early hours of the morning next to him. I've never been able to get him moving on video. Usually when this happens, the camera malfunctions, the file gets corrupted, or the camera gets moved. However, I did capture him removing a sheet of him I put on his once to keep the dust off him, but I did witness him move once while holding after he had an accident. He turned and looked me directly in the face. It was a very quick movement. I no longer video Luca full time, if ever, because it became too costly. So far, he's cleaned 6 sets of cameras, 3 laptops, and 2 tablets. All were brand new and worked perfectly before using them in regards to him. He seems to allow me to record to the point before he's had enough. But to sum up some points about Luca, as to try to keep this as short as possible, he seems to have his own personality and even loves the odd prank. Animals love him. I've seen a cat we once had embrace him in bear-type hugs, smooching to his face, and our border collie used to lie in his feet as a pup. Lucas loved animals on at least 2 occasions. We witnessed balls that have been left near rolled towards our cats. One even made a right-angled turn. He doesn't seem evil when he turned his head. It was often towards me where my wife would sit staring at her. I feel that he was trying to warn us. Lucas seems very shy and doesn't like cameras. Luca does things on his own terms when he's ready. Finally, we just accept that Luca is himself and no one in our families are afraid of him. It was my mother's 45th birthday, and my younger and elder sisters and I, alongside family and friends, were celebrating my mother's birthday at a restaurant. I was 17, and my younger sister was 16 and my elder sister 22. It was getting late, and since my older sister was in her 20s, she decided to stay whilst my younger sister and I decided to head back home. Since neither of us had cars, we took an Uber home. We had this tradition where we would frequently watch scary movies together, sometimes with our friends. We didn't live together, and our parents were divorced, and at the time, I lived with my dad, and would stay with my mother and two sisters over the holidays and celebrations. We got home, and we got to my younger sister's room upstairs. Let's call her E, and discuss what movie we're going to watch. After deciding, we go downstairs to get snacks, and there's a corridor connecting the staircase downstairs to the kitchen. Maybe 10 to 12 feet long, with a single door to the left, leading down to the basement, and a door leading to another room on the right. We're halfway to the corridor, and we hear somebody take 3 solid steps upstairs. You know when you hear someone walking upstairs, and you can hear their weight pressing down on the floor with the creaking sounds? It was like that. So much so that we simultaneously looked up, then at each other, and I asked her if the sister is home. My younger sister and I refer to our older sister as sister, and the two refer to me as brother, and my older sister and I refer to our younger sisters by her name. She said no. Her eyes were wide open and scared, and so were mine. Initially, we just wanted to run out of the house, but we decided to return to the restaurant, but our phones were upstairs, so we couldn't order an Uber. I slowly crept up the stairs with my sister behind me, because she was scared to be alone, and after making a deal that if we saw someone, we would dash for the door. We get up to her room, and all the other rooms upstairs, and there's nothing. We check all the doors and cabinets, and nothing. Nothing is on the floor. We checked all the windows, and all of them were closed. No sheets on beds disturbed. Under the beds, and again, nothing. We collected our phones and took an Uber back to the restaurant, and told all the adults our story. And all the adults drunk were just laughing at us. My mother especially being sarcastic, referring to our granddad that had died several months ago, saying he came to visit. To this day, my sister still has the voice recordings from 5 years ago on her Snapchat, of us freaking out, sending voice memos to her best friend frantically, explaining the situation. And even now, I remember her friends jokingly replying that we can stay at hers for the night. This is one of my only unexplained paranormal things.